I first gave my life to Christ as a young man at the age of 14. I was in senior 2 in a grade school called Adultery School, where I met my uncle and my friend Canon Aaron. He was our chaplain. My own father and mother followed in their footsteps. My father has since gone to heaven. He passed on in 2015. But my mother is still around, weak, frail, going through the struggles of old age. She's now 84, but still saved and so precious and sweet because she knows her Savior. So that's the kind of family I came from. And then I went to Handshake school. I thought I had found freedom that I would never have found in a clergy's home. My father was a clergy of the Church of Uganda. So I was very quick to venture into everything that my age would allow at that point. So I started tasting the alcohol. It was initially bitter. After a few months, it became sweet. I started smoking. It was very contaminating. And after a while, I became very addicted. I would not do without a cigarette. I loved the opposite sex, but I think I was too young to know what to do with them. But I know I would have fantasies about the next dance, the next social hour, the next so on and so forth. But out of that madness, just 2 years into it, in my senior 2, at the age of 14, the Lord captured me by His grace, and I gave my life to Christ. And indeed, the Lord was so faithful. I went through high school, I went through university, and I was a good guy. Saved, humble, and everything was a tick. But seasons come. As soon as I finished university and I started working, I went into a season of spiritual drought. I remember my first 2 years of service was in the Wharton area of northern Uganda. At that time, 97, if you remember, I spent 2 years without going to church. It was simply too dangerous for anybody to step in church. And the spiritual drought set in. I struggled as a Christian, weak, compromising, hiding some secrets, until when my weaknesses caught up with me much later in life. I know I had just married. It was my second or third year in marriage that I started some inappropriate relationship at work. And I kept it to myself, and I moved on in that weakness until one day when I hit the rock bottom and I fell into the sin of adultery. And at that point I said, I can no longer pretend to be saved. Maybe it's time I give up. And I almost did. But by the grace of God, I felt so lost. I regretted my sin. I regretted my treachery to my beautiful wife. And I started finding ways to come back to Christ. And it wasn't easy in installments. I'm so happy, and why I said I'll start with my testimony, because I had a testimony from people who come from an environment where it is even very dangerous to say you are saved. Now, people being that vulnerable, I feel more challenged to be more vulnerable than I've been. So I started the effort of seeking grace and forgiveness, and I did it in installments. I first spoke to my best friend and to this girl. It's a relationship that I never stayed in longer than the act itself. I immediately had remorse and I moved out. But I spoke to these people. I said to the girl, I said, I lied to you. You know that I'm married. This must end. And to my best friend, I said, pray for me. And that did not actually work for me. I felt still very weak. I felt I could easily go back. And I had struggled mentioning this to my wife and repenting. But finally, I picked the courage and I spoke to my wife. It was heartbreaking and it was painful. But even then, I did not get the victory. But I thank God for one night. This was on the 1st of June 2014, about 10 years ago. I was from fellowship, and I'm happy I'm surrounded by the people I had in that fellowship. We had gone together with my fellowship of KRA of Kampala Revival Fellowship. But we had also gone with a team of brethren from Kenya whom I had been with for 3 years working in that country. And one night the Lord woke me up and he asked me this question. He said, what will it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his own life? And at that point, I said, Lord, what are you talking about? He says, you're my son, but there's something that you need to put right. And at that point, I picked the courage to really, really denounce the sin of immorality and all sorts of impurity that had captured my mind for many years, that had climaxed into this. Yesu, Yesu omwana gwandika, Yesu omusai gunaziza nebaza omurokozi. So that's the first time I picked the courage to denounce my sin and to seek for forgiveness before the brethren, before my family, without any sense of shame. And I remember this night, after I had accepted, even before I told anybody, to denounce my sin and really put myself on the cross where I put my Savior many years ago for him to forgive me, I had a voice speak to me, and the Lord said, you have humbled yourself, because for many years when I was struggling to recover from that failure, my concern was my personal image. How will I be seen? How will people think about me? They've been thinking I'm a saved person, I'm a good person. How will? And of course for my wife, I was saying, if she knows, supposing she decides to end this marriage. But I remember very well that night, as I repented before the Lord, before I spoke to anybody, the Lord spoke to me and he said, you've humbled yourself for my sake. You have agreed to lower yourself and honor me. I will show you what honor means. I will rise you up to places you have never been. And the Lord has been so faithful. I remembered speaking to him again that night. I said, Lord, if you forgive me and you forgive my sins and you lift me up, wherever you take me, whatever level you take me at, I will never fail to honor you, because this is about you, it's not about me. And I thank God that by his grace, he has enabled me. I remember when I was appointed in URA and they invited me to preach, I gave them this testimony. This is a big organization full of intelligent people. Most of them could not understand why I was saying this. Some of them approached me after the service. They said, but Commissioner General, you're very important. Why are you addressing yourselves? I said, no, if I don't do it for the Lord, I know I'm here because the Lord has honored me. If I don't honor him, I'll be treacherous. So I take opportunity even now to be vulnerable and to tell you that I am who I am because of God's grace. Had it not been for grace, I was destined for destruction. Had it not been for that grace, everything of mine had the potential to go wrong. I remember the kind of things that were happening in my marriage. I was the one not faithful, but I suspected my wife not to be faithful. And I would really put a lot of pressure on her. I would travel a lot and I would want to know, where is she? Who has she visited? But I want to tell you, brethren, from the time I really surrendered my life to Christ, everything in my life has gone in the right place. There is so much joy and happiness in my family beyond what I can explain in words. Those who have been with me and my wife, they know what she would say if she was here. There has been so much happiness in my family, among my children. There has been so much growth in my career. I commit, I will always honor the Lord before anybody else, because I know where my strength and my victory comes from. Let me now, and let me say this. While I was still there, not really saved, the thing that kept me back was also self-righteousness. I thought I was so good on my own, and I didn't need to be so vulnerable and show myself and my full weaknesses. But finally, when the Lord won and He spoke to me and I surrendered everything to Him, I was able to see my iniquity in totality. Even the things I considered good, the Lord showed me what was not right about them. And then the things that were good, the Lord brought them into their right place. I was speaking to some audience, I think a month ago, the men's fellowship, and I told them, while I was a young man in that madness of smoking, I was the treasurer of our smoking club. Whenever we went to school, would be worried about running out of cigarettes before the end of the term. So we had a group of smokers would bring our money together and give it to the trustworthy treasurer to keep it. My role was ensure there are enough supplies of cigarettes up to the end of the term. And that is a value of integrity that God had put in me, but I was using it for self-destruction. Now, when I got saved, and because God had put that value of integrity in me, one of the areas I've never struggled is financial integrity. What is mine, what is not mine is not. The Lord now put me in charge of the National Treasury. My job is to collect revenue for the development of this nation. And I do it without any struggle. What is for government is for government. My main challenge has been to fight corruption to end it in this organization. But I thank the Lord. But this is what now the Lord has been able to do. He aligns the good value He had put in you to its right place when you submit to Him. I encourage you, friends, fully submit to the Lord.
Download the app on App Store or Google Play Store now. Vision Digital Experience, the future of media.